Welcome to Piecemeal. Welcome to a Between Bites Piecemeal episode. Piecemeal is a podcast hosted by the Emily Program, and Between Bites are short episodes addressing topics you want to know more about. Piecemeal covers topics related to eating disorders, body image, and how society may influence our thinking. Please use your discretion when listening and reach out for support as needed. I'm your host, Jillian Lampert, and for Between Bites, you get just me. Welcome. Today's topic is all about Mental Health Awareness Month. Did you know that May is Mental Health Awareness Month? So we thought it would be a good time to talk about how eating disorders are a mental health condition and why we need to keep speaking up about mental health. So, mental health and eating disorders. We need to talk about mental health and eating disorders together in the same sentences because eating disorders are a mental health disorder. Uniquely, though, they are a mental health disorder with really strong physical health components that can have potential impacts on the heart, the kidneys, the liver, the skin, the endocrine system, the immune system, the reproductive system, so many of our body systems. And in a more perfect world, we just have health and not a separation between mental health and physical health, because let's face it, our bodies and minds can't be separated like that in real life the way they may be on paper or in our approach to healthcare. But until then, we need to keep talking about eating disorders as a mental health condition. They are the mental health condition with the second highest mortality rate of any of the mental health diagnoses. So while eating disorder recovery is 100% possible, dying from these illnesses is a real possibility. And that means we need to make sure that more people know about them, know how to recognize eating disorders, and know what to do when they recognize that they themselves or someone they know might be struggling, so they know what to do next. So let's start with, what does it mean that eating disorders are a mental health and a physical health issue? So eating disorders are considered a mental health issue because at the core, they impact what we think and feel about ourselves, our bodies, our eating, our food, our appearance, or our experience with food. And these thoughts and feelings result in behaviors that can be dangerous and in some cases life-threatening. These behaviors can have a dramatic impact on our physical health, leading to all of the things I mentioned before: kidney failure, cardiac arrest, dry skin, dry hair, tooth damage, malnutrition, to name a few specifically. And ironically, many people who develop an eating disorder are trying to be healthy with their eating, with their moving. They're not trying to cause damage to their physical health. And in the process of trying to do all these things to be healthy, they get overwhelmed with compulsions that impact behavior, with this obsessive approach to behaviors that they feel like they can't stop and are actually starting to be detrimental to their physical health. And that sort of experience of the messages and the thoughts about eating disorder behaviors, those thoughts and feelings, that's the mental health part. Our brains experience fear, concern, anxiety, and more when it comes to food and eating when we're struggling with those thoughts, with that eating disorder mental health component. And we know in part that this is because mental health conditions like eating disorders have these neurobiological underpinnings. And we talked about this a little bit last month, but in quick review, what do I mean by neurobiological underpinnings? So the genetic research done across mental health conditions has shown that some people have genetic predispositions for these conditions, meaning they have some genes that make it more likely that they will develop a mental health condition, in our situation, develop an eating disorder under certain circumstances. So this genetic predisposition means that if somebody starts to change their food intake, people with these gene markers are going to have a higher likelihood of having those behaviors sort of ignite the eating disorder. Those genes really influence the parts of the brain that our brain experiences reward in those parts of the brain. Though that kind of reward, what do I mean by reward? I mean the parts of the brain that both anticipate something happening, which feels really good, and the part of the brain that registers, yay, that felt good, let's do more of that. So when we are changing our behaviors, maybe in part because of the strong social influences that lead people to change the way they eat, to look a certain way, or to be accepted in a certain way, or to just feel loved and admired and valued, that really puts us at risk for trying to do something with our bodies to look the way that society tells us we should look. And so we think, okay, if we eat differently, if our bodies are different, then maybe then I'll sort of fit in, and we all want to fit in. So back to the genetic predisposition part, if you have that genetic predisposition, it's a little bit like a candle wick that's sort of lit by the match of social messaging. If you don't have the genetic predisposition, yeah, you might get a little burned by the match of social pressures, but that match goes out. If you have the genetic predisposition, it really lights the candle and it can burn for a long time. So the eating disorder, sort of mental health, physical health combo platter, if you will, we have these mental health conditions and this mental health potentially genetic predisposition that leads people to behave and feel a certain way that influences their actions and their patterns that can make it very difficult to change those patterns. So once somebody starts dieting, for example, or once somebody starts moving in a way that is it at first maybe a desire to be healthy, it can really result in an eating disorder that somebody needs help with in order for it to feel better. And that's the good news. The good news is that eating disorders are treatable mental health conditions that can go away. They really can go away. Many people go on to recover from an eating disorder. They don't have to think about it. They don't have to manage it every day. They don't have to deal with it every day. They certainly don't have to struggle with it their whole lives. I know lots and lots and lots of people, myself included, who experience eating disorder recovery in that way. It's a little bit different than some other mental health conditions where the mental health condition is more managed once it occurs. That's the situation for some of the mental health conditions that people experience. Eating disorders are also a little bit different in that there are very few medications that directly help people with eating disorders. Because, many people with eating disorders also experience anxiety or depression. They might find relief from anxiety and depression symptoms with medication, but there just are not yet many medications that can help with the eating disorder thoughts and feelings and the eating disorder symptoms. That said, the good news is that the main medication for an eating disorder then is food, which can be super scary and overwhelming, but it's true. Adequate nutrition is the cornerstone to eating disorder recovery so the brain and the body can get what they need to heal and to function well. And then, in addition to the medicine of food, ongoing support and development of strong coping skills is critical. And that's where treatment comes into play because lots of people with these illnesses want to sort of take care of it themselves, quote unquote. Well, people say that a lot. These are illnesses that require a support system for recovery. They just do. And if an illness has a strong society influence in its development, which eating disorders do, it makes sense that people would need a strong social support system in recovery. And that's where treatment comes in. So, treatment is critical not only to get the nutritional rehabilitation needed for recovery from an eating disorder, it also needs to include the therapy and the medical interventions that are important in recovery. That's why talking about eating disorders and mental health is so important. We need the public and healthcare providers both to know more and then to do more. If you know someone who's struggling with an eating disorder, or perhaps you are struggling with an eating disorder, we really need to underscore healthcare providers knowing what to do and knowing how to screen and knowing how to recognize eating disorder symptoms and eating disorder behaviors so they can refer that person to get help with an eating disorder specialist. And I want to underscore it is never too late to reach out for help. It's actually never too early to reach out for help. Help is available, and the sooner you reach out, the less time you or that person will have to suffer with the illness and particularly suffer alone. A lot of people who experience an eating disorder believe that nobody else will understand what's happening with them, and that's part of why they don't reach out for help. The eating disorder is not your fault. You didn't choose to have this illness. I think it's really important for us to remember that. And we're talking about mental health in our circles. We need to make sure that people know that people don't choose to have an eating disorder, that it's not anybody's fault they have an eating disorder. And the good news is that choosing recovery and having the support of loved ones around can be the key to health and well-being. And that can be a support of loved ones in many different ways to structure a support system because recovery is really hard work. We hear that over and over again on stories here on Piecemeal. Recovery is really hard work. We also hear from all of the folks who talk about recovery that that hard work is worth it. And supporting your loved ones in that work is worth it. So during this Mental Health Awareness Month, how can you increase awareness in your circles? That's a really important key to this whole puzzle is all of us talking about mental health. That is a first great step. Let's talk about mental health. Let's talk about mental health broadly. Let's ask people how they're doing, and then listen and offer support. Ask people if we can help them get more connected to support. And here's a really important step. Once you've asked, keep checking back in. Check back in regularly. Getting support and help for an eating disorder or any mental health condition often isn't a sort of once and done situation. You may have to have multiple conversations just to get someone help the first time. So let's, this month of May and mental health awareness, and frankly, every month, keep working to build a world where mental health is as talked about as physical health and access to support is just as widespread. So let's dive into this Mental Health Awareness Month with a goal to talk more about mental health, to be part of that conversation, to be part of the dialogue, and to connect with each other over this really important topic. As always, if you have a topic you would like to see discussed on Between Bites, drop us a line and let us know. If you enjoyed today's episode of Piecemeal, please subscribe, rate, or leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Learn more about us at emilyprogram.com or find the Emily Program on social media. Piecemeal is produced by the amazing podcast team at the Emily Program. Until next time, take care. Thanks for listening.